Chers amis,
My dear friends, would you kindly take your seats? I hope you had a great lunch. You should all be shouting out yes to that question. Yes, me too. I had a very good lunch too. So I would like to say to you that this session is quite unique. In fact, first of all, it's very tricky. The question, what are the society choices that we're going to be making? A very difficult question. And in all likelihood, this session corresponds the most to the title of these 2.5 days here in Aix-en-Provence, i.e. recreating hope. I'm not saying that we are going to recreate hope without having choices to be made about our society. And I think at the end of this hour that we're going to spend together with the 5 different people who are here that we have, and I'm going to tell you who they are and explain why they're so outstanding. So I'm just going to say that we are going to identify what the perfect society is that will enable us to foster hope. So perhaps I'd make an introductory comment. My generation is, when you to ask that kind of question, would trigger a simple debate. Do we want a capitalistic society or do we want a socialist society? That was 45 years ago. And there was a kind of clear cut between those, above and beyond the admiration they might have for Russia or for the States. The idea was that that was the criterion. And lots of economists talked about that and demonstrated this, that, and the other. But that was the key question for 20 years. And then the Berlin Wall fell in '89. And we made a small mistake, a small intellectual mistake. At that time, we thought that because we thought the world was becoming a market economy, and we thought that that meant that was capitalistic economy was being globalized under a single system, which is more or less the system of the English-speaking world. So 20 years later, we noticed that state capitalism in China, for example, all the other types of capitalism have become very diversified, and each one has shown that it has evolved in its own unique way. Every one has its own structure and differences. So we've grasped that at long last. Then we had a whole series of difficulties, and we arrived at today. Today, from my point of view, and may I say that the true change is the COVID crisis, which really has changed our behavior as a society, but also our individual behavior in the way that we broach work, health, all the rest of it. So behind all of this, there's climate change, of course, which has really accentuated the subject. But that being said, COVID really did completely overhaul the way that we behave. Today, we're wondering what society is. What is society we're living in? What is society we want to live in? What is society we want to build? It's going to be a market economy. You have seen things evolve towards more industrial policies. Everything can still change, of course. But the truth of the matter is that today we are 1 hour before we identify the solutions during our debate and solve all of the problems in the world. We do not know now what society will look like tomorrow morning. Let me reassure you that we have not 1 hour before us, but only 50 minutes now. So to talk about this, we're going to address every single issue. We're going to talk with Philippe Val, who you all are familiar with, who is an outstanding business leader. Yes, he is exceedingly talented, and he is going to tell us if you want to change the world and society, then you have to focus on businesses, and that means that businesses have to change too. That is the tricky thing, and that's what Philippe Val is going to reveal to us in just a few moments. Then we have another outstanding person with us on the stage, Véronique Bédag. She's at the top of Nexity, and she has also had roles with the government. She was the advisor to the Prime Minister here in France, and today she's at the top of Nexity. So she's going to tell us the kind of town planning, the type of regions we want to live in. She's going to talk about what social change is all about from that perspective. So those 2 points we've already solved. Then we will hear from Rodolphe Sade. Everyone knows who Rodolphe is. He's a business leader, of course, outstanding yet again. And for people here in Provence, I'm saying that. And he is going, because he's based down here, and then he's going to tell us, how we're going to change society by changing globalization and changing the international activities. We're going to change this universe that just seems so obvious to us. And then immediately after that, we'll be hearing from a lady, Asma Mala. And she has been seen by many people on the television. Her point of view is from a technological standpoint, and she's going to explain to us how in this new society which we're going to build in 50 minutes, she's going to explain how in reality we are going to be able to get a grip on those GAFA companies, how we're going to manage that topic. That might take 7 to 8 minutes for her to go through that in depth. And then after that, we have our former Prime Minister, Mr. Edward Philip. I'm not going to pay him compliments. He knows how great he is. The crowd knows how great you are. Let's give him a round of applause. And that was only the first surprise in store for him this afternoon. And he is going to tell us in this new society that we're going to construct, he's going to say what the role is of politicians. What is the role of all kinds of stakeholders in civil society? Anyone involved in the public debate, who I think are pretty scarce on the ground today, but that will lead us, perhaps not onto our conclusion, but a major point. So having said all of that, having said how absolutely outstanding everybody is, I would like to add that I myself am not too bad. So I'm going to hand the floor to Philippe Val. Thank you very much, Jean-Hervé. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Jean-Hervé was right in saying that a change in society, when you think about it, was either capitalism or socialism. It was a debate of ideas, and it was the movement of social forces, the unions, the NGOs, associations, or political life, i.e. political parties, state institutions. However, in contemporary society, because of mass consumption, because of relationships being treated as goods, businesses have become players in social change. And the energy transition will only be possible if we can transform businesses. That's our thesis anyway. That's our hypothesis. So businesses are actors in change in society, because businesses, the businesses that serve you every day, they have an impact on your everyday life, and they even influence your own behavior. And they have an impact on daily life. That means changing, impacting thousands and millions of people. That means changing society. So let's do a test here in the room to see the extent to which in this room, as we're all dozing after our lunch, businesses are changing. How businesses are changing the way we live. Raise your hand if today you have used Google. Raise your hand if you've used Google today. Someone hasn't Googled? Rudolph, have you not Googled today? Yes, everybody's used Google today. So raise your hand if you have used WhatsApp today. Okay, slightly fewer. So raise your hand if in your behavior today you have used Facebook. Not bad. For intellectuals. And how, raise your hand if you've used TikTok today. There, but we're a very old population in the room here. So at the end of the day, you can all see these digital businesses have decisive influence on the way that we live. They therefore are actors of change in society. They are making us change. And there's an even more central player of climate change, because businesses today are shouldering a kind of role. They have stolen fire, they are consuming nature to produce services and goods for 9 billion people. It's like Prometheus, in the Greek mythology, and that enhances our quality of life. But it does have an essential impact on the climate, on our quality of life. And so businesses are completely central players in the ecological transition. They are absolutely central to that. And that central role that they play, we experience also because businesses are key players in what academics, professors, teachers called anthropocene, i.e. this is the entire life of humanity, the conditions of life that we experience, and the conditions of life of the planet itself are all impacted by human beings. So businesses are, if we get back to our question, essential players in social change. So, given that, what do we do to make sure that businesses help with our number one concern, which is the energy transition? Let's listen to what the scientists have to say. Scientists consider that we're all victims of collective blindness, that we haven't understood these subjects, and that we're not moving fast enough. Well, so that we can pick up speed, businesses are going to have to get on board and start rolling their sleeves up. The first thing is that businesses, our businesses, we've got several business leaders on the stage here, we are trying to evolve. We've understood that the world is changing. And so, as far as decarbonisation is concerned, we are communicating, and it really is important to communicate. It's not just communication. Communication means sharing messages. It means raising the degree of awareness of people on these subjects of climate and energy. So as well as communicating, businesses are supporting ecological projects. They bring testimonials to the table. But when you fund an energy project, if you pay social or ecological dividends, if the profit that went towards that comes from pollution or from shale gas, then we realize that businesses aren't only supposed to be communicating and bring a testimonial, which is important also. What they actually need to do is to transform themselves. The businesses need to transform themselves. And so once that is said, one realizes how difficult it is, because as a human being, we know how difficult we find it to modify our behavior. And when you're talking about a business, well, businesses find huge difficulties in modifying their behavior. So how are they going to go about this? They obviously have to act, but they also have to speed up. They have to act. The first thing, and many business leaders are on this road already, they have to consider that they produce benefits, which is very nice, but that cannot be their only reason for existing. In fact, this ecological transition should enable us to get beyond that Friedman theory, which Lorenzi, my old professor, used to tell me. The Friedman theory says the only goal of a company is to maximize its profits and satisfy its shareholders. We see now where that leads to. Businesses, therefore, have to, of course, still keep looking for profit, but they must also endeavour to measure their own impact on the outside world and to play on that. It really is essential. And it seems to me that businesses must understand that when pursuing simply profit, they will not be guaranteeing their own survival. And to find out whether a business has a good business model, then you have to change that business model and answer to the question of what would my business be if the cost of carbon went up 10 times. What would happen to my company in that situation? So the businesses therefore have to speed up their transformation by their direct actions. They have to make energy savings. They have to use other indicators than just profit. They have to have good scores in non-financial activities. That's what businesses can do by understanding that it's in their interest to change themselves. And that is a really difficult thing. And businesses also need the state to stimulate them. And the state is there to determine standards and to send stimuli to the different businesses, saying you have to respect this rule, you have to have a low emission business. The state can stimulate business, and I will complete with our role, our own role, because we too participate in the Rencontre d'Aix, the meeting here, but we are also clients. So as a client, are we ready to change our behavior? It's down to us to blame companies for polluting too much and not engage in that transition. So if we have to inverse our priorities, and we must use not price as the sole criterion of choice. We can't just choose without rethinking about a delivery by the post office, because it emits twice as much carbon as something else in Germany, for example. So what I'm trying to say is that shows that here we're talking about team spirit and cooperation. We cannot change the business model that we've been talking about since the beginning of these few days here. We can only do it if each individual player changes their model. Businesses have to shoulder their responsibilities, as does civil society and the state. And as business leaders, when we are at the top of business, we have to do that. And when we're citizens, we have to do that. And we have to do it when we are clients as well. So by assembling together all of these different aspects of the human being, then we will have a tiny chance of changing society and in succeeding in this energy transition. It's not a foregone conclusion. Thank you very much, everybody.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Philippe. It was very enlightening. We'll go back to your companies when we talk about the training programs. I would like, for those of you who didn't write it, who didn't make a good note of it, it's the word colissimo that is being used. It's a system, it's a postal service in France.
Bon, jeunes gens. Bonjour à...
Hello everyone. My answer to the question that's being asked today is, of course, influenced by what I do at the head of Nexity as a real estate developer. The first transformation is quick to make, is very uncomfortable, but it's indispensable. It is the environmental, the ecological transition. This is really our core business. It's not in the hands of the CSR of Nexity. It's our core business. How do we produce buildings that are low carbon and consume less energy? You've heard about it a lot, and I know that some of you know what is the RR20. It is a regulation that I find indispensable that obliges to address various requirements. The ARE20, we're going to achieve it. We're starting to embrace it. We're now building modular housing units. I reassure you they're as beautiful than the traditional housing units. We're building housing in Lyon, to give you an idea of the risk that we're taking, we're building in Lyon a building, a whole apartment building without any AC and heating. It works in Switzerland, it works in Austria. So, but it's not really the new housing that should trouble us right now, because we talk about 5%, 1%. This is marginal. What happens to us today, because of regulation that was passed 2 years ago, is all the citizens, all the owners nowadays need to look at the property that they own and look what is the energy performance of this building, and the French acronym is DPE, and the law is going to compel them to make the necessary works. We're looking at 36 million in housing units in France. Not all of them are affected by the works, but about 50%, we estimate, are going to need to do the necessary works. So this is going to be very uncomfortable because it's expensive. Not everybody will be able to afford it. So that will be absolutely necessary. We all have to have houses, apartments that consume less in the winter and that are more pleasant to live in the summer. For those of you who are still in Paris in the summer, it's unbearable. So this is but the works are going to be very difficult, and it's going to be uncomfortable, because it makes a lot of people in France uncomfortable. They don't know if they're going to be able to do it. They don't know when to do it. They don't know when it's going to be compulsory. And we are also property managers. There will be some solutions, but nonetheless, it will affect a large part of the country. We can say the same thing about the city. The city must change. If the city changes the way it is, there's some summers that we will not be able to live in the city any longer. So, okay, let's have less cars downtown. Okay, let's do that. So would like everybody else to stop driving, so there would be no traffic jam. But there are a lot of works everywhere, and the cities are going to go through this period of transition. We love the city, but we have a complicated relationship with the cities. So this transition period is uncomfortable. It's not a big deal, but it's uncomfortable. The second topic, from my point of view, that is even more uncomfortable, is my conviction, and I'm very eager to hear what everybody else is going to say about it. The energy transition is going to increase the divide between the inequalities. A low carbon building is more expensive than a building that has not been renovated. So at some point, some people will be able to afford the low carbon city and some people will not. Another example that is very explicit is a city driving within the city. If you live just outside of the city and you have an old used car and it has it's a combustion engine, and all of a sudden you're told that you cannot drive into the city center, well, you just have to buy an electric car, and then you'll be able to drive into the city, but it's more expensive. And in these times of uncomfortable transition, this transition will increase the inequalities. It will have another effect, and I'm very vocal about it. It also deals very badly the newcomers, those who are not part of the housing market, the young ones, the people who start with the first job and want to buy their first apartment. They're treated very badly. So at the end of the day, we have to do something that costs more. I am not pessimistic. I believe that we'll find some solutions. But at the time, it is uncomfortable. And if we don't do anything about it, the inequalities will increase. An energy transition costs a lot of money. And Mr. Prime Minister, you see where this is coming. This is coming at you. I believe that in times of uncomfortable transition where the inequalities might get worse, there is an absolute necessity to have a global narrative that tells us at the end of the day, this is painful, but this is the society that we're trying to get to. We can't just say in the current society you won't eat any meat anymore, you won't fly anymore. I am convinced that on the society that we're facing, we can put a very positive narrative. But if we don't do it, we're going to leave a lot of people behind, and we're going to explain where everybody is going to fit in this new society, that the transition will be a bit uncomfortable, but that at the end it will be good for everyone. Because I believe that this new society that we're about to build is much more fun and much more pleasant than the one that we're living in today. But the political authorities have to express, they have to tell people what are we heading to, so the young ones feel like they're excited to go there. I think there's really room for that kind of narrative. Last point, and it's a more personal one, we have to promote more exchanges. It's a change of civilization. Our relationship to the world, the relationship of man to the world, was a very domineering relationship, and we're going to have to do with the world. We're going to have to learn how to deal with the world. What has really changed in my business, once we finish talking about the energy transition, the RE20, is the look on the developer on what he's building and doing today. I tell my teams, when you're going to start a project, just take a moment and look what has already been made. There's some humans in the middle of the projects. How do we work with the people who are here? How do we work with the real estate, the buildings that are already here, with the nature? Maybe there'll be some animals, maybe the nature. This look is going to be philosophically very different from what we did before. It is complicated, and when we learn how to look at things this way, we do things with a much better quality and much more acceptable. So that's how I would like to conclude. We need to change our relationship to the world. All of us need to change. There's no other way forward. It's toward a world that's going to be more friendly. So we have to remain extremely optimistic, but we need to tell the young ones the story of this low-carbon society, much more respectful of humans and nature. Take your mic, because we're not completely done. You haven't said one word that is at the heart of common, terminology. It's regions. Why didn't you speak about the regions? Because I'm more thinking in terms of cities right now. If I were to mention the word regions, I would say the urban planning in the regions. We have completely left things the way they are, and so there are some areas that are very densely populated and some that are less. We're not only talking about rural areas, we're talking about urban areas as well. But I think there may be some die-hard socialists there. There's room for state intervention. We will not, even if companies do whatever they can, the state keeps more than ever a fundamental place on the history, how we live in the region, in our place, in our territories. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. So now we're going to go from the city to the world. Rodolphe, what does our new world society look like? Thank you, Jean-Hervé. Hello, everyone. I will not talk to you about maritime transport, but a choice of society. To be honest, when I ask myself the question, I could not come up with a real precise answer. I have many ideas that I'm happy to share with you, but I will be very humble in my answer. What we see today is that we live in a world where crises happen all the time and everywhere. So it's not always easy to adjust to those crises. And there's some transformations that are linked to digital and to AI, which means that our society has to evolve as well. I travel quite a lot, and I go from one country to the next, and I noticed that we cannot impose on a country the choice of society. It's up to the country, to the people, to see what society they are happy in, whether it's a company or a country. What do they want to live? I see a few young people in the room. You will have to answer on what kind of society do you want for tomorrow, because we don't want to dream about a solution that you may not like. On this topic, we'll also need you to bring us your recommendations to make sure that this new society that we all expect can happen, can take place. When we talk about choice of society, do we still have the choice of the society that we want to live in? On some issues, no. On the environment, we're all convinced, Véronique, Philippe, or myself, that we don't have a choice anymore. We have to move ahead, put a plan to decarbonize our jobs and the society. I commend the decision that was taken yesterday by the MOI to be carbon zero and to set the course to get there. So I think that was a good decision. We see that economically the world has changed as well, and the globalization that we've had in the past may be a thing of the past. And we see more and more regional routes, circular economy that is growing, and people want to consume as they used to. I think this is changing. I like to take this example of the kiwis that you buy at the store, that they're flown in from New Zealand. But this, I think, in terms of carbon, is not good at all. It's good for the shipping industry because you participate in the financial situation of the group that is doing very well, thank you very much. But it's not good for society and even less good for the planet. And then, from a social point of view, what can we do? In CSR, we tend to forget the S. We need to work more on education. Today we're talking about programming. If we have a more precise program on what we want to do in terms of education, it would be good. Because to give some prospects to young ones on education would help a lot, particularly on issues of poverty. For the group, CMA, CGM, if I look at it under this angle, what we need to target is a growth model that is balanced. After 2 years of COVID, how are we going to do it? I think that today we're all aware that our mode of consumption is changing, and that in our consumption choices we'll have to take into account the environment. Then also everything that's linked to social issues. At CMA CGM, we put in place initiatives. I talked about innovations, but at the level of the company, we also put in place an academy that will open its door at the end of the year. We also have an initiative called the Albert School. It's a coding school that was put in place, set up by a young one who has a lot of good ideas, and it sets us in the good direction. And then when we talk about choices of society, do we wonder about how much it's going to cost us to have this choice? Do you feel that the environmental bill is not going to cost anything? We talk about a lot of money to decarbonize the planet, and some companies are going to have to play a role in it. And on some topics, we should not just trust the politicians to do the job. As citizens of the planet, we have to harness the challenges and the subjects and try to move forward. I am not in favor of letting others do what I can do myself. For the environment, the bill is going to be very heavy because the green cost is very expensive. Then for everything regarding the quality of our team members, they must need to have a decent wage. To be able to give a decent wage to an employee, you have to distribute dividends and better treat the team members. For those of you who don't share my opinion, it's okay. But what I'm saying is that a company has to pay back a bit of dividends. We pay 10% of our profit in dividends, and 90% is reinvested in the company and in the welfare of the employees. Because in order to be able to grow in a world that is changing significantly, we need to have employees that have a positive mindset. Thank you very much.
Sur ta dernière...
On your last proposal, Rodolphe, I was wondering if we're going to do the same thing that we did with Philippe. If we have to vote who's for, I think everybody will be for. Asma, we're facing a society where we wonder how it's going to relate to technology. How do you see the evolution and the way we're going to build a society that will be less dependent? The question that you asked me initially was, how do technologies that can seem intrusive could participate in the reconstruction of a peaceful society? That was the question that I had to solve in 4 minutes. The word...
Mettre une focale, c'est pas technologie, c'est apaiser. Parce que ça sous-entend donc qu'il y a une crise, et là, il n'y a strictement aucun scoop. Et puis après, si on avance un tout petit peu, on peut se demander de quelle nature est cette crise-là. Et à mon sens, elle est triple. C'est d'abord une crise envers l'État. C'est ensuite une crise entre nous, et donc une crise de la démocratie, ou plus exactement de l'exercice démocratique, qui repose sur la confiance. Et les technologies, par exemple l'IA, dont on a beaucoup parlé ces derniers mois, pourrait être une menace à cet exercice-là tel qu'on le connaît. Et puis enfin, une crise dans l'avenir, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a une énorme difficulté collective, et donc individuelle aussi, à se projeter. Et à partir de là, intervient le rôle de la technologie, qui est en fait mon domaine à moi, et que je lis souvent sous le champ politique ou géopolitique. Et en effet, en fonction de ce qu'on en fait, des usages qu'on en a, de l'intention politique qu'on lui donne, vous allez avoir une même technologie qui peut être mise au service du meilleur ou du pire. Et ces technologies-là, celles dont on parle, les technologies numériques, sont en fait des technologies systèmes. C'est-à-dire qu'en fait, elles nourrissent à peu près tout. C'est-à-dire nos systèmes de production, de consommation, d'éducation, de rapport à la démocratie, de liens de socialisation entre nous, etc. Donc ce sont des technologies totales. Et en ce sens, elles nécessitent donc une pensée politique totale, de la même façon. Et à partir de là, à mon sens, il faut un tout petit peu de méthode. Il faut surtout rester calme. C'est-à-dire que sur l'IA, typiquement, on a assisté à une énorme hystérie collective ces derniers mois, où on a fabriqué des paniques, où tout le monde ne savait plus s'il allait garder son emploi, garder son enfant, garder sa vie, que des robots tueurs allaient détruire l'humanité, que des super-intelligences allaient venir nous manger, le tout dans les 2-3 mois à venir. Tout ça, c'est du fantasme pour l'instant. Il n'y a pas une IA, si je prends l'exemple de l'IA, il y a des IA qui vont avoir des applications spécifiques en fonction des secteurs, des industries et donc de l'usage qu'on va en attendre. Et c'est là qu'intervient là où le politique, c'est-à-dire quelle vision. Et les deux grandes problématiques que moi je vois dans mon champ, qui est le champ technologique, c'est d'abord la question de la souveraineté technologique. On n'en a pas parlé de ça. C'est-à-dire qu'on peut analyser le monde comme une entité. Aujourd'hui, c'est faux. Vous évoquiez en fait Fukuyama et la fin de l'histoire, qui n'en est pas une, qui est un recommencement. Une rivalité aujourd'hui qui se joue entre États-Unis et Chine, qui cristallisait autour de la question technologique, en particulier de la question des IA, et en particulier de la question des semi-conducteurs, etc. Et on pourrait aller ainsi de suite en affinant l'analyse. Et la question qui se pose à nous, Français, ou à nous, Européens, c'est quelle sera la nature de cette fameuse troisième voie qui est rêvée, qui est aujourd'hui rhétorique, et dans laquelle on a encore du mal à trouver le mode d'emploi. Et on a du mal à trouver le mode d'emploi parce que je pense qu'on a mal compris cette question de souveraineté technologique. Et il ne faut absolument pas la prendre comme un totem, mais plutôt la comprendre comme un rapport de force Or, pour tenir un rapport de force, il faut savoir ce qu'on a à mettre sur la table, de façon transactionnelle, vis-à-vis à la fois de nos rivaux, mais aussi de nos alliés. Et c'est là, à mon sens, où il nous manque de la méthode, et c'est là aussi, à mon sens, où il y a de l'espoir. Parce que, dans le fond, si on paraphrase un tout petit peu Fernand Braudel, et si on lit l'histoire sur un temps long, et non pas là tout de suite dans l'immédiateté, qui en effet n'est pas forcément très joyeuse parce qu'on est en transition, et que quand on transite, eh bien, par nature, on ne sait pas exactement encore où on va. Mais donc, si on prend de la hauteur et de la perspective, eh bien, développer, construire une vision, c'est-à-dire se dire où est-ce qu'on est fort, où est notre place, où sera notre positionnement, eh bien, tout d'un coup, à mon sens, à moi en tout cas, devient possible. Et dans le cas de la France, il y a des choses très simples à faire qui ne sont toujours pas faites, qu'on pourrait faire, comme des diagnostics de filière pour savoir où sont nos assets, où sont nos actifs, sur quel tronçon des valeurs, des chaînes de valeurs stratégiques on peut s'insérer. Et il y a des pays qui l'ont fait. Israël dans le cyber, etc. La Turquie dans les drones. Le problème qu'on a aujourd'hui, c'est qu'en fonction des buzzwords, en fonction des effets de mode, en fonction des peurs collectives, on a tendance à saupoudrer. Parce qu'on est dans l'immédiateté. Alors, à mon sens, la technologie, prise dans sa dimension géopolitique, c'est justement se détacher tout à fait de l'accélération, et c'est contre-intuitif ce que je vous dis, c'est de ne surtout pas accélérer, mais c'est tout le contraire. C'est de prendre le temps long, développer sa vision, construire sa vision, et les leviers sur lesquels un pays comme la France pourrait peut-être, à terme, rester éventuellement, et je prends beaucoup de précautions, une puissance technologique. Et puis le deuxième et dernier point, c'est la crise démocratique, évidemment, que les réseaux sociaux, par exemple, ou les IA demain, ou le métavers demain, ne vont absolument pas du tout créer, mais vont très certainement amplifier. Or, ce sont des technologies étrangères, des technologies en l'occurrence américaines pour la plupart. Et c'est là où intervient votre question, et ça sera mon mot de la fin, c'est comment on régule, comment plus exactement on repense la relation entre État et géants technologiques, Big Tech, ou GAFAM, vous diriez. Je ne parle pas de GAFAM parce que ce n'est pas exactement le même périmètre en réalité. Et là, il y a des réflexions aux États-Unis qui sont très intéressantes. Et de ce point de vue-là, c'est-à-dire de ce côté-là du monde, du côté des démocraties occidentales, si on a encore envie de donner une chance à ce modèle politique-là, il y a peut-être des ponts à trouver transatlantiques sur une nouvelle gouvernance de ces géants technologiques. Et aux États-Unis, il y a des réflexions qui sont très intéressantes qui sont menées, par exemple pour changer leur statut juridique, en ce qu'on appelle des common carriers, c'est-à-dire vraiment des infrastructures avec des statuts hybrides, public-privé, qu'on peut repenser, qu'on peut discuter. Mais l'Europe et la France n'aura son mot à dire dans ces discussions qu'à condition, et je reboucle avec mon premier point, qu'elle ait quelque chose à mettre sur la table et donc qu'elle puisse tenir son rapport de force. Et d'une certaine façon, et pour terminer donc, ce n'est pas tellement une crise technologique qu'on a, c'est une crise politique. Et la technologie, de ce point de vue-là, c'est peut-être aussi la résurrection du politique avec un grand P. Et c'est peut-être ma transition vers vous, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Juste une parenthèse, c'est une formidable animatrice.
Comment ?
Asma, tu es une formidable animatrice.
Merci.
Voilà. Bonjour à tous. La question qu'on m'a posée, c'était la question de la place des politiques dans la transformation des sociétés. Et tout ça avait beaucoup à voir aussi avec la question de l'apaisement. Alors, je voudrais commencer par dire, pour reprendre un mot que Rodolphe a prononcé sur l'humilité, que je pense que les transformations de la société transforment au moins autant les politiques que les politiques ne transforment les sociétés. Et je pense qu'il faut donc, et ça me fait plaisir d'être probablement le plus marxiste à cette table, rappeler que les transformations du monde obéissent quand même à des sous-jacents extrêmement puissants, liés au progrès technologique, liés à une vision du monde, et qu'ils sont tellement puissants. Alors je ne dis pas du tout que les hommes politiques ou que les femmes politiques n'ont pas vocation à s'en saisir et à essayer de les organiser, et à essayer de les réguler, et à essayer de les diriger. Mais je pense qu'il faut quand même avoir en tête une forme d'humilité consistant à penser que les transformations du monde, elles se font. Et nous, on les fait avec, si j'ose dire. Ça, c'est la première chose. La deuxième chose, c'est que je voudrais revenir sur ce mot d'apaisement qui a été au cœur d'un certain nombre de prises de position et au cœur d'un certain nombre de débats. Parce que je crois qu'il correspond à un besoin très fort de démocratie apaisée, d'apaisement d'une société crispée, angoissée. Je pense quand même que si on veut réfléchir à la question de la transformation des sociétés sur lesquelles nous pouvons influer, il faut savoir ce qu'on veut. Et je ne crois pas, mais je peux me tromper, je ne crois pas que si l'on cherche l'apaisement et le confort, on puisse avoir en même temps le mouvement, la puissance et la grandeur. Et j'incite beaucoup de nos concitoyens à réfléchir à cette forme de paradoxe. Les grands moments de la France, ceux pour lesquels nous avons une forme de révérence, d'admiration, les grands moments de notre histoire, sont assez rarement des moments d'apaisement. J'ai peine à penser que la Révolution française est totalement un moment d'apaisement. Je vois peu de choses dans l'avènement de la République qui correspondent à une volonté d'apaisement. Et j'insiste là-dessus, parce que l'apaisement, il y a une forme de confort. Vous savez, c'est Pompidou qui disait les peuples heureux n'ont pas d'histoire, et j'aimerais il écrivait ça juste avant de devenir président, j'aimerais on parle de mon mandat de 69 à 60.
About my mandate from 69 to 76 as a mandate where there were no revolutions, no wars, and that no one would talk about me, they'd forget me, and we'd see the growth of purchasing power. I'm not quoting him, obviously, you can check up his speech in the history books. But the important thing is to know whether or not we are looking for soothing, or whether we need movement. And I think we need movement. I think many people are looking for soothing and relaxation, but no, we need movement. And if it's a question of transforming society, I think it would be quite nice to have a society that has been appeased and healed, but I think we are looking more towards a society which is ready for combat on three scores. An intellectual fight, for example, political fight, but it is a society of combat. The first point which is in front of us, which we will not guarantee with appeasement, is that it is going to be our responsibility to defend liberal democracy. And for many of us, coming back to that notion of defending liberal democracy, it's just not a foregone conclusion, because we have grown up in a world where there have been contexts. However, we thought it was a foregone conclusion. Democracy is with us. But that's not the case at all. And I think we are going to have to defend it against attacks from outside, intellectual attacks. Many, many countries are saying to us today that to guarantee economic prosperity and political stability, the regimes which are not liberal democracies get better results. So the best way to guarantee balance between collective prosperity and political stability has been liberal democracy. Democracy, that's what we've grown up with. But today, in China and the United Arab Emirates, up until 18 months ago, Russia, and with a lot of fascination inside our country, you have noted states that are saying that to guarantee prosperity and stability, then other systems rather than democracy are more efficient. We are going to have to find a means to defend liberal democracy from certain developments, such as this refusal for a civil debate, for being civil rather than confrontation. And when earlier on we said who've been using the technologies and social networks, you all raised your hands. Yes, me too. I use social networks. And it means that you put yourself along with people who think the same way as you. And that is not a democratic debate. It's not a public debate. We're going to have to struggle against that trend which is a considerable danger for democracy. That's the considerable erosion of the purchasing power of the middle class. There has been no democracy in history that has functioned well if it has been faced with long-term erosion of purchasing power of the working classes. And so our generations are going to have to combat in order to defend what we thought was a foregone conclusion, that democracy. That's the first point. Second point of this combative society, how are we going to show that this democracy is able to clear-headedly, efficiently face the hottest challenges of the moment? I doubt that your children, ladies and gentlemen, and that your grandchildren will have the complete certainty that democracy is able to answer to the climate issue, for example. I don't believe that. I'm not at all convinced about that. Let me tell you the truth. When my son tells me that seeing how efficient our democratic system has been in settling the complex question of pensions, he's hardly optimistic about our capacity to solve the climate challenge, and I can't come up with any reasons to convince him. So you have a question which shows that to face this climate challenge, when no one's contesting that there is a challenge, some people might be talking about how urgent it is. Some are saying, well, is it really so urgent after all? But I believe that that point has been proven. Is democracy able? And the second combat is how are we going to construct an economic and a political system which will lead to an equilibrium between individual freedom, collective prosperity, and impact on resources? For a long, long time, we lived in a political productive system which addressed the question of individual freedom and collective prosperity, with discussions about which is it more or less. But at the end of the day, these two sides of the triangle, there's a third side now, which is what is the right system? And it's not an easy question, because is it the market that's going to answer that, or is it the standards that are going to respond to that? I think standards can be a possible tool to respond to that. The second combat that we're going to have to face is to identify how democracies can be able to construct a model that will systematically take into account the impact on resources. And the real truth of the matter is that we don't really have that model yet. We've become aware of it. We've got individual and collective commitments, which is not bad. We've got a legal framework, which is all well and good. But we have not yet created the productive system that is totally operational to find itself at the crossroads of those three priorities. And there's a third combat, which takes us back not only to political values or organization and politics, but takes us back to the notion of power. Our generation is going to be faced with something which is new. It's new for everybody. And that is this situation of pushing things out to the borders. So Europe and France, if we don't take care, and let's be cautious here, Europe and France are going through something which is amazing, it's radically new, and that is the peripheralization of the world, because we have a lot of tension between the other side of the Atlantic and the other side of the Atlantic. We are taking the risk of gradually, step by step, but sometimes a bit more quickly, being shoved out into the outskirts. And do you know what happens when you're on the outskirts? Well, usually you're rather fragile. And so if we want to defend democracy and define a system, we are going to have to address a question we rarely broach, which is the question of power. The foundations of French power and European power, because they're more or less the same thing. And all of this, that's three reasons for fighting. So in power, of course, there's a question of education, but let's not go down that avenue. It is the most important pillar. So if our target is to say we want to build an appeased society, then I doubt that these three combative ideas are going to be our priority. If we don't adapt them as priorities, we will not have appeasement and will not have greatness. So appeasement, and I'm saying this to be provocative really, because that's great when it's really hot and we're all hot and bothered already. We are all hot and bothered, so let's have some provocation. I think that appeasement must be a subproduct of the movement, a consequence. It cannot be the first and major objective. So I suggest, ladies and gentlemen, that we think on this combative mindset. Well, how do you follow that? I think we've got 5 minutes left. Oh no, it's over. Our time slot is over. So I would like to take home with me the role of business. I'm going to take home also the notion of housing and all of those questions of equality. I'm going to take home with me also the notion that, oh, hang on, attention please. We're not quite finished. We're not finished yet. I sound like the teacher at the front of the classroom here. Yeah, be careful everyone, because Lorenzi knows what a combat is. He fights the good fight. Well, you can take home with you your messages, but my conclusion was that this was a wonderful debate from the beginning right through to the end. It was absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much.